Thank you for that, Emma. So we're not going to wait till Sunday. Let your body take you there. You can join in. Come on. Come on. Let the body take me there. Okay. Thank you. So you're probably thinking, what was that about? Well, that is part of the story. That is part of the story. And I'm going to own that story, Sue, because it has empowerment in it. So I'm going to own that story. So let's rewind the story a little bit. So my first encounter with depression was in my third year of medical school. My father passed away suddenly back home in Botswana. So my father wasn't that much older than I am now. You're probably wondering. So, and my father was a kind of man or father who would have you believe you could fly. So as you can imagine, my world came crumbling down. So after the funeral, I bid my mom and my 3 sisters goodbye, and I returned back to England to complete my studies. And as you can imagine, it was tough. It was very tough on my own. Eventually, with the help of antidepressants, some counseling, and some supportive friends, very supportive friends, I managed to somehow piece myself together and carry on regardless, because I had to, I had to. So life moved on. I managed to ride out the storm, and I had my ups and downs like everybody else. So fast forward 5 years. I'm now a qualified doctor, and I'm married. My husband and I decided to now living in Botswana because I wanted to work in Botswana for a period of time. So I'm working in a small mining town, and my husband is running a small business about 100 miles away in the main city. So we are shuttling back and forth at weekends mainly to see each other. One weekend he'd been down to see me. And on Monday morning, time for him to go back. And tried to start his car, it wouldn't start. So he had to go and catch a ride. Nothing new there, he'd done it before. It was an old jalopy anyway, so he was used to it. So he had to catch a ride to go back into the main city. So after work, I just realized that I hadn't heard from him all day. So I pick up the phone to call him on his mobile. The phone rings a few times, and then a voice answers the phone, and it is not my husband. So I think the voice on the other side sensed my confusion there, and he went on to introduce himself. I'm PC such and such, and your husband has been involved in an accident. Okay, so when I eventually find my voice, I try to ask something, and all I could manage was, is he? Is he? So PC such and such senses the difficulty yet again, so he steps in and volunteers, he's alive. I think that was what I was trying to ask there. So that's all I needed to hear. Got off the phone with PC such and such, called one of my friends, a fellow medic, and we bombed it down to the main city, the longest 100 miles of my life. So we get to the hospital, and we find the nurses are in one cubicle talking to one patient, and we go through, and in the next cubicle, my husband was lying there, writhing about in a semi-conscious state. Without a second thought, we medics, we just engaged autopilot, gloved up, started bellowing instructions, oxygen, IV access, hard collars, and just do what came natural to us. But to be fair, it was mainly my friend. So I got on the phone to arrange for my husband to be transferred to another hospital with better facilities. So the CT scan of his brain showed that he had a skull fracture, he had massive brain swelling, and he had a bleed in the middle of his brain. So it didn't really look good. Not at all, it didn't look good. So my husband was in a coma for a month. And I was 8 weeks pregnant with our first child. I prayed. So that was 6 months later. So as you can imagine, a new baby, a husband recuperating from a serious head injury, we decided in our wisdom to return to the UK. Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. So I'm on my own, left family back home. It wasn't long before the dark cloud reared its ugly head yet again. I spiraled into a depressive episode. Back to my GP again. Back on antidepressants, some counseling. And being me, I put my head down and kind of got on with life. I had to. Yet again, I had to. It was difficult, it was tough, but somehow I managed to carry on regardless. And life went on, somehow, life resumed some kind of normality. So we're going to fast forward another 5 years. There's a pattern here. Fast forward another 5 years. I am now a partner in a busy training NHS GP practice. Husband and 2 kids in tow this time. Glutton for punishment or what. So if any one of you has worked or works for the NHS, you will know that it can be a very rewarding job. It can be. But equally, the sad reality, and often due to circumstances beyond our control, it is weathering. It is relentless. So before I know it, life soon becomes this non-stop roller coaster. I'm operating on constant doing mode. I daren't stop, just have to kind of keep on. Life becomes about everyone else. I'm taking care of everyone else's needs. The patients, the practice, the kids, the husband, the home. To be fair to me, I put my foot down at the dog. Don't get me wrong, I love dogs. But I just could not risk the RSPCA knocking on my door. So what do? You guessed it. Buckle up, put my head down, engage autopilot. Gotta get on with it. Can't be seen not to be coping. Gotta stay in control. Because I'm superhuman, aren't I? No, I'm not. Life becomes all too encompassing. I'm teetering on the precipice yet again. And with the little insight that I have, I am back at my GP's. We have a chat, lovely GP, we have a chat, and you guessed it, I walk out with a prescription of antidepressants. Again, I'm not quite sure about my slides. Yeah, I walk out with a prescription of antidepressants again. So really, this is not a story just about me. because we all have a story along the same lines. We all have our story of the world. And as a doctor, this is where the story begins. The super doctor syndrome, yes, it is a thing. And over 7 in 10 doctors in the UK apparently are afflicted with this well-known condition, the super doctor syndrome. This is where we're constantly measuring ourselves against this perfect, unrealistic ideal, akin to personality type A type thing. So, gotta stay in control. Cannot be seen to be not to be coping. Gotta put my foot down, my head down. And sadly, this is a culture also in medical school. But you know, things are changing. A bit slowly, but things are changing. So, you know, can anything go wrong with that? Possibly. Can anything go wrong? Possibly go wrong with that? I mean, the headlines speak for themselves. There was a report published by the Society of Occupational Medicine that revealed that UK doctors are at greater risk of burnout, stress, and mental health issues than the general public. The very same report revealed that the incidence of suicide, especially among female doctors, GPs, and trainees, is comparatively high. In a UK study where they surveyed around 1,000 doctors, 32% of them reported that they suffered with burnout at some point in their lives, and 14% reported that they were depressed. Across the pond in the US, there was a study in 2015 where they surveyed 7,000 doctors. 54% reported that at some point in their life they experienced one of the 3 main symptoms of burnout. Double that of the general public. Earlier this year, in July, Harvard Business School reported that burnout in doctors was costing the US healthcare system $4.6 billion a year. So what could possibly go wrong? That is what could possibly go wrong when we aspire to this superhuman trait. On top of all this, it is the stigma. The stigma of mental health in doctors is still very pervasive. And the level of stigma is actually related to the reason why doctors will not seek help. Of course, the impact of the current challenging working conditions and the political climate, might I add, cannot be underestimated or ignored. This is a real crisis. So there you go. We are facing a crisis among those who are meant to be caring for us. So the thing is, we all have our vulnerabilities. We are not superhuman, we are human. Death, ill health, accidents, it all happens, we feel the pain, but somehow we are hardwired to react in a certain way to these vulnerabilities. We compound our distress by contracting, by thinking that we can think ourselves out of difficult situations. The mind proliferates. It catastrophizes. It creates all sorts of stories. And this is what compounds the problem. And really, it is about realizing that for as long as we behave in this certain way, when we compound the problem, when we think we can think ourselves out of difficulty, the story gets embedded. The story becomes the shape of our lives. How we incline the mind becomes the shape of our lives. We are the architects of our world. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. You know, the thing is, life happens, it throws at us all sorts of difficulties. And there are things that are beyond our control that we simply cannot argue with. But I can tell you that there's a heck a lot more that we can change if only we open up to the possibilities, if only we step out of that kind of trap and open up to the possibilities that there are other options. We don't always have to react. We can potentially think of a different way that we can respond. There is a choice, an alternative path that became a journey of self-discovery, an alternative path that invites the sense of exploration, curiosity, allowing, spaciousness, kindness, self-compassion. An alternative path that is about a cultivation of a different way of thinking, ennobling qualities, I call them, a cultivation of skillful ennobling qualities, a cultivation indeed, that a pathway indeed that has been cultivated by many for thousands of years. So I'd like to shine the spotlight of attention on only three of some of these ennobling, skillful qualities that can liberate us from this pattern of reactivity, from this self-inflicted pattern, cycle of distress. Number one, awareness. I think we've talked a lot about awareness here. Awareness, we're talking about, begins with a simple noticing. Noticing without judging. Noticing the thoughts, the feelings, the body sensations. And just noticing them for what they are, without the story that we create. Thoughts as thoughts, feelings as feelings, body sensations as body sensations. This is an intentional way of being present with experience as it unfolds moment by moment. And with all this awareness as well, it is about noticing the tendency of the mind to create stories. That's what the mind does, the mind to blame, the mind noticing its tendency to judge, and noticing that as well, without judging, if you can. And just this simple awareness over time, with kindness, with patience, and this blossoms into an insightful awareness, where you begin to understand the relationship between the mind and the body. I think somebody alluded to the fact that we live up here, and essentially we just use our bodies as, a vehicle that transports us, our minds all over the place. So noticing, you become more insightful, you notice the relationship between the mind and the body. You notice the relationship between the thoughts and the feelings and how they affect your behavior and vice versa. You begin to notice those habitual patterns when you begin to spiral, and you can actually pause and create space and perhaps even just ask, what is this? What is going on here? What does this need? And just opening up to possibilities. Which brings me nicely to weaving the parachute. I love this expression. I borrowed it from Jon Kabat-Zinn. Some of you, if not all of you, will probably know him. He's very much an expert in this space, written many books, including one called Full Catastrophe Living. You can relate to that book. So we all know that a parachute enables you to land safely, right? So weaving the parachute is about creating an action plan, creating a toolkit that you can easily access and deploy when it is needed. It is about learning to self-care and actually making self-care a discipline, not an additional extra, because that's what we tend to do. You know, for example, having a regular exercise routine, running, walking, yoga, whatever you enjoy, whatever sits comfortably with you. I run, I'm a runner, and I'm not going to lie, I don't enjoy it all the time, but you know, the feeling, the headspace that it affords me is what keeps me going when the mind tries to sabotage my good intentions. So running is my thing. Having a regular meditation routine or a short practice that you can, you know, keep under your sleeve and deploy in stressful moments to just intercept the ruminations and the downward spiral. Or perhaps having a word or a phrase that you can just invite your mind to invite a sense of calm when you're feeling somewhat unsettled. May I be at peace. May I be at peace. May I be at peace. Just a word or a phrase, and just noticing what happens when you do that. And breathing, just punctuating the day with moments of just taking a deep breath. I think Emma again alluded to this, that the sense of the breath, how it just centers you, it anchors you into the present moment. And let's not forget the playlist, the theme song to your life. That's just like, you know, pressing a switch and I am happy. You know, having that. There are so many other things that you can put in that toolkit so that it's easily accessible when you need it. It becomes second nature. Because ultimately, our self-care, this is what supports and sustains it. This is what supports and sustains our well-being. Third and final quality, equanimity. The sense of equanimity, it's about having the ability to stay calm and rooted in the midst of it. It's about having the stability and the solidity of a mountain in the midst of it. This sense of equanimity is very much underpinned by the other ennobling qualities, the awareness, the sense of awareness, the acceptance, the kindness, the non-judgment, and it needs to be constantly nourished by other qualities such as, you know, the kindness, the love, the joy, the connectedness, all those other things. It is about having the courage to begin again and again and again in the midst of it, knowing that this too shall pass. So, I'll be the first one to admit it is not an easy path to cultivate, but then as the saying goes, nothing worth doing is easy. And this path is also not a panacea. And I guess for me, as a conceptual person, as a doctor, what somewhat settles or keeps the super doctor syndrome in check, because it never quite goes away, what keeps it in check somehow is the fact that over the last 20 years, there has been a burgeoning of neuroscientific studies using functional MRIs showing neuroanatomical plasticity in the area of the limbic system in relation to meditative practices. So that's what kind of reassures me that this has legs, you know? So, to finish really, life happens, it throws at us all sorts, and we react because we are human, get ourselves trapped in this loop of distress, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. When we are aware, we can see things for what they really are instead of the story, the fabrications of our mind. And this blossoms into discernment, which enables us to see possibilities. When the sun is shining, we need to weave that parachute. That self-care is essential. It's not an optional extra. It's what, keeps us going. Finally, not only is it liberating, it is empowering. It empowers us to be able to harness this sense of equanimity, of knowing that all will be okay while we're going through it, while we're going through the storm. Thank you.